Hey, what's up guys, it's DoubleZug. So yesterday we got this announcement about Elemental Rune Dungeons, the new dungeons that are coming with the Dragon Soul patch, that these are going to include a bunch of like LFR gear as well as all the tier sets at 384 eye level, so meaningfully that eye level is lower than Heroic Firelands tier gear. So this got me thinking a little bit about healer gear for the tier and what you're going to want to take into prog on week 1, because you are going to be able to farm these dungeons before the raid comes out, so you're going to be able to get some of this gear before the raids. So I made some sets for all the different healers for this, just to compare the stat loss as well as like the value of the 2 and 4 set to see whether you want to run like Raid Finder 4 set or Firelands 4 set or double 2 set. So I'm just going to go through these really quickly here. I'm going to start with Disc Priest. This is with like my setup with 4 set, which I think is going to be useful for some different fights in Dragon Soul, the longer fights, the fights that need some more AoE healing. If you're going to run DPS set, you're going to run off pieces, and I don't think you want either of the tier sets for that. I made a little spreadsheet here with all of the stat differences. So you can see this is the stat values for Firelands tier, and this is the stat values for Dragon Soul tier. So you can see here what we lose. We lose about 230 secondary stat and 21 intellect. I'll just discuss this really quickly here. A lot of these Dragon Soul tier pieces, though they are 384 eye level, which is lower, they have a lot of extra sockets, specifically on the chest and leg pieces, and those sockets also have like a big bonus with intellect, so you don't lose that much main stat as you'd think you would going down in eye level because of those extra sockets. So we lose like 150 spirit, and we lose some crit for haste, 232 overall secondary stat, and 21 main stat. So the difference in the value of the 2 and 4 set have to be bigger than the stat loss in order for it to be worth it. So let's look at the 2 and 4 set. So Firelands 2 set is mana regen on like Palm and Flash Heal. It's worth about 400 MP5, assuming like a 95% uptime on fights where you're going to be consistently casting Palm. And the 4 set is a proc that just does a bunch of AoE smart healing, which does about 5% of your healing, or like 12 to 1400 HPS, depending on critical luck. So now let's compare those to the Dragon Soul 2 set. I'm going to go really quickly over what those 2 sets actually do here. 2 set is 25% mana reduction on PI for 10 seconds for Discipline, and for Holy it's 23 seconds on him. And the 4 set is going to be a 10% chance to proc double healing and double mana from your Rapture ability. So overall that's 10% more mana and 10% more healing from Power Word Shield. 2 sets like only about 200 MP5. This is like a conservative estimate. It could go a little bit higher than this, given that I didn't model that you're probably going to be spending more mana than average inside of the cooldown. But overall, it's probably like 200, 250 MP5, so you're losing a considerable amount of MP5, like almost halving your MP5s. And the 4 set is going to be like about 1.3% healing from the Power Word Shield 10%, and the 10% mana from Rapture is about 260 MP5 in progression gear. This will go up a little bit over the tier, which is going to be overall like 1300 HPS. Unless you're spending all of your mana, the value of these 2 set bonuses is basically only the 500 HPS you get from the Power Word Shield bonus, so it's considerably lower, whereas the 4 set from the Fireland set is just direct healing, so it doesn't require you to be actualizing all your mana regen value. So if you're playing a style like that's mostly Atonement where you aren't spending all your mana, the 4 set from Firelands is going to be much more valuable than the 2 and 4 set from Dragon Soul. So overall for Disc Priest and Holy Priest, I don't think you're going to be wanting to wear either double 2 set or 4 set from the Dragon Soul Raid Finder tier. So next we're going to talk about Druid. I'm going to really quickly go over the set bonuses here. So the Firelands 2 set is 40% chance to restore 1% base mana each time Life Bloom ticks, which is actually quite strong. And the 4 set doubles your Swiftman healing and causes the doubling to be like a smart heal. The Dragon Soul 2 set, there's sort of a trend here where the Dragon Soul 2 sets are going to be like mana reduction for 15 to 20 seconds. So this is 15 seconds of 25% reduction whenever you use your Innervate, which is a 3-minute CD. And the 4 set is a 10% chance to double the duration of your Rejuve and Regrowth spells. So Regrowth here is not really that important. The Regrowth Hot doesn't do that much healing, but Rejuve is pretty significant, right? It's 10% more healing on your Rejuve. So let's compare the stat loss here. So overall, we lose a significant amount of stamina to go Dragon Soul gear on all these sets, which is not like super significant, but that reduction in health, will sometimes kill you in a fight, maybe some of the time. Overall, we lose 276 secondary stat and 31 main stat. So again, not a significant main stat loss, but a highly significant secondary stat loss. A lot of this secondary stat loss is also in Spirit, and Spirit is really, really nice for Druid, although we can make that 2005 haste breakpoint with both sets, so you don't lose the haste breakpoint going for the Dragon Soul tier. 2 set from Firelands is again 400 MP5. This is basically going to be a trend across all the Firelands 2 sets. They're around 4 to 500 MP5, and the 4 set is 5% healing, doubling your Swiftman. Swiftman does about 5% healing, and that of course will give you 5% more healing. So let's look at the Dragon Soul 2 set. So the 2 set here is 15 seconds, 25 reduction on Innervate, which is a 3 minutes. So that's about 2% mana reduction overall. Again, you're going to be concentrating more of your casts inside this cooldown, so it's going to have a little bit higher value than this, but on average it's going to be about 230 MP5. So again, a little bit more than half of the value of the Firelands 2 set. Another thing to just mention quickly here is that all of these 2 sets give you a % mana reduction on a CD, and that's going to negatively interact with Jaw's mana reduction, as I talked about before in my previous videos about trinkets. So you're probably going to want to desync your Jaw's usage with your 2 set usage to gain maximum value from both. This is going to be especially important for classes like Druid and Holy Priest, which gain an insane amount of value from Jaws. So that's the 2 set. What's the 4 set? The 4 set is 10% more healing on Rejuve. So this is going to be about like 2.4% healing, depending on the profile of the fight. This is going to go up and down a little bit, but it's about half the value of the Firelands 4 set. The one thing to mention here, though, is that because it doubles the duration on Rejuve on a 10% chance proc, it's nice for pre-hotting with double duration before damage events happen. And it also gives you more coverage across the raid because those hots are going to last longer, so it allows you to put Rejuves up on more players. Similar to Priest, you're not going to want to wear either double 2 set or DS 4 set with this lower eye level. You want to keep your Firelands tier gear. So Holy Paladin's next. This is a little bit of an interesting one. So you can see here I use 60 upgrades for this gear set. I use 3 different systems just because, I don't know. You just have to bear with me on this one. So I set up my currently equipped from live, which is like basically the BIS list that I would use. There's a little bit of differences here from the like Wowhead BIS list, but it's basically the same. I'm also reforged away from haste towards crit on this setup or overall healing with radiance, although the secondary stat values are the same for the actual like Wowhead BIS list. If you're stacking haste, it's basically the same thing. And then I just did a setup with the 4 set from Dragon Soul. So let's look at the stat losses. Again, we get about 150 less stamina, significant health loss, but not too big of a deal, especially with Holy Paladin being that you're incredibly tanky. We lose 200 secondary stat loss, and we lose 20 main stat. So again, pretty low main stat loss, but a significant secondary stat loss. So let's compare the set bonuses. So the set bonuses for Firelands are going to be 40% chance to get 6% base mana on Holy Shock, and the 4 set is going to be 10% smart healing off your Divine Light, Flash of Light, and Holy Light spells within 15 yards. And the Dragon Soul set bonuses are after you use Divine Favor, you get 25% mana cost reduction for 15 seconds. And the 4 set, this 4 set here is actually like at the wrong version. It's not 20%, it's just 5%. So it's going to increase the healing done by your Holy Radiant spell by 5%. So let's compare the value of those. Again, the value of the DS2 and 4 set is going to have to be more than the secondary and main stat loss to make up for this. So the Firelands 2 set is going to be like between 450 to 500 MP5. Incredibly powerful 2 set here. This is a huge amount of MP5. And because we're a Holy Paladin, all of our extra mana is very easily converted to healing with Divine Light and Holy Radiance. And the 4 set's actually really small for Firelands, given the limited range as well as the small percentage of your casted heals, as well as the fact that in Dragon Soul we're going to be using a lot more Radiance and a lot less DL. This set is going to be like, 1 to 300 HPS. It also seems to underperform even across logs in Firelands where you're doing a lot more casted heals. It just seems to not do as much healing as it really should be doing. Alright, so let's look at the Dragon Soul 2 set and 4 set. So the 2 set's going to be 25% reduction on DF for 15 seconds. That's a 3-minute CD. So overall your uptime, if you use this on cooldown, you're going to get 2.1% mana cost reduction, about 200 MP5. Although this is going to tend a little bit higher if you use more mana than average under the DF, which you probably are going to be doing. So it's going to go up to like 250 MP5, maybe 300 if you're using it perfectly and on CD. However, if you're saving your DF for a particular window and leaving it off cooldown, this will go down again. So I'm just averaging like 200, 250. So quite significantly less valuable than the Firelands 2 set. This is going to be a pattern across all the tiers. So let's look at the 4 set now. So 5% Holy Radiance healing. Across like mixed fights, Holy Radiance is going to be like 40% of your healing. And during periods of like really high burst where you're just spamming it on the stacked rate, it's going to be like, 60% of your healing. Value on this across Dragon Soul fights where you're going to be using mostly mixed or high Radiance usage, it's going to go from like 800 to like 1300 HPS in prog gear. So this 4 set is much more valuable than the Firelands 4 set, but I don't think it's more valuable than the Firelands 2 set, honestly. Outside of circumstances where you really need like peak burst healing on your Radiance, like potentially Ultraxian, something like that, I think you probably for Paladin want to run double 2 set, given that our Holy Radiance already does an insane amount of burst healing. And other than that, we really just want to have more mana to cast more Radiances overall, especially on these longer fights in Dragon Soul. So what pieces would I use to run double 2-set? I would probably use the Raid Finder tier for chest and legs to get access to those triple sockets and big socket bonuses. I would use the Firelands tier for head and shoulders, and then I would use the plate off piece from Firelands, which is Spirit Haste plus a red socket for your off piece. All right, last but not least, we're going to talk about Shaman. So Resto Shaman has a big come up in this tier. SLT is really good, and a lot of the fights are stacked, where Healing Rain is really nice, as well as Shaman just being a nice flex healer, and on a lot of these fights, you're going to have to flex up to pretty high healer count. So our 2-set from Firelands is going to be a 40% chance to restore 1% base mana every time Riptide heals a target, and our 4-set is going to make Chain Heal no longer consume Riptide. So this is basically just a 25% increase to Chain Heal if you use it properly. The Dragon Soul tier 2-set is following the theme where when we use our Mana Tide totem, we get 25% reduction for 15 seconds, so this is basically identical to the Holy Paladin one. The 4-set increases the duration of Spirit Walker's Grace by 5 seconds, and you gain 30% haste while Spirit Walker's Grace is active. This is very powerful and turns our Spirit Walker's Grace not only into a mobility cooldown, but also into a Bloodlust for 20 seconds. Notably, you can also use this on DPS Shaman specs and then swap for the fight. So now let's look at the stat losses. You get 150 stamina, again just some HP. We lose 62 intellect, so a little bit more than the other specs just with how the gear works out. And we lose like 170 secondary stat, so a little bit less secondary stat and a little bit more main stat loss for us. Now let's compare these set bonuses. So the Firelands 2-set is going to be about 400 MP5, and the 4-set is going to be like a 2 to 4% HPS increase, depending on how well you use Chain Heal and how much you cast it. Varies a little bit, but it's about 6 to 1200 HPS. So how valuable is DS 2 and 4-set compared to this? Well, the 2-set here is going to be the same as Holy Paladin. It's just about 200 MP5. So 2-set's worse than Firelands 4-set by about 50%. Let's look at the 4-set though. So plus 5-second duration on SWG is nice for mobility. 30% haste for 20 seconds on a 2-minute CD is like 16.6 uptime, which is about 5% haste average, or 640 haste rating average. You also get some value on this by getting to the next breakpoint during it for Riptide, Earth Living Weapon, and Healing Rain. So it's going to increase your burst healing quite significantly, as well as just giving you some value from that average haste. So it's kind of hard to calculate the HPS value of this, just given how like tick rates work and all that stuff with haste. But I would estimate that this 4-set's like better than the Firelands 4-set, especially given the bursty nature of some of these fights, where just having access to a powerful throughput cooldown on a 2-minute is really, really nice. That said, I don't think losing the 2-set and all these stats are worth gaining that 4-set. However, if you are extremely sweaty, you can always farm this 4-set just to get a snapshot on pull. Also, given how most healing shamans are going to be flexing Ellie, you're probably going to be wearing mostly Ellie gear anyways, and given how Telluric Currents works and how you scale with all your secondary stats pretty well and pretty evenly on Shaman, gearing is not like super important for Resto, honestly, unless you're really a sweaty Resto main. And if you are an Ellie or an Enhanced Shaman, you want to farm this 4-set anyways to snapshot before the pull. So that's my overall analysis of the tier sets. Quickly before I leave you here, I want to mention that if you can get access to Ma at a Raid Finder eye level, it probably is better for a lot of the healers for overall HPS. And if you can get access to some of the trinkets, they might be like marginally better than the heroic stuff, although you will lose some intellect on the passives. However, the gain and loss for the RF trinkets is not going to be super significant for most of the healers. However, if that Ma is available, depending on how the proc scales with eye level, it could be quite a significant HPS boost, especially for the stacked up fights. So that's the video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed or got value out of this, send a like and subscribe, comment below, all that stuff.
Swobu, Zug Zug.